love this painting of Dad.
Yeah, I'm trying.
You can do the cartwheel. Kind of. What's your favourite thing? Apart from Minecraft. Yeah,
It's the opposite.
I think.
And the 60s is the decade most closely associated with Peter, because his filmmaking in the second half of the decade is now regarded as the most important documentation of the counterculture on screen. The archive reflects his work and not only covers 50 and more years of filmmaking, which has been only one of his artistic pursuits. All these artistic pursuits will be covered in the archive because really Peter is the ultimate Renaissance man. A scientist,
an Egyptologist,
a musician,
photographer.
he's a publisher and a translator,
A potter.
an artist,
And a falconer.
This is also a curtain raiser for tomorrow's Borderlines Interdisciplinary Conference. And I thought I would take this lyric by a musician Peter knew well when they were both in Cambridge in the early to mid-1960s, and who was later to be in the eye of Peter's camera in the cultural maelstrom of 1966-7. And that, of course, is Syd Barrett, who has always positioned himself on what Graham Greene liked to refer to as the dangerous edge of things. Peter has explored the dangerous edge between the yin and
Yang.
working class origins,
Privileged education.
insider,
Outsider.
the word,
The image.
science,
Mysticism and shamanism.
the rational,
The uncanny.
life.
Death. And on his creative journey, he's travelled with an extraordinary collection and collective of friends, collaborators, and very active muses, including
Ted Hughes,
Penny Slinger,
Anthony Stern,
Niki de Saint-Phal,
Andrew Oldham,
Mia Martin,
the Saudi royal family,
Bianca Jagger,
Howard Marks,
Dido Goldsmith,
Syd Barrett. In the film we're screening today, his muse is the Italian supermodel and photographer Alberta Di Bruzzi.
but just as extraordinary is the variety of artists that his camera has recorded, including
Michael Caine,
Julie Christie,
David Hockney,
Edna O'Brien,
Allen Ginsberg,
Peter Brook,
Adrian Mitchell,
Glenda Jackson,
Mick Jagger,
Marianne Faithfull,
Lee Marvin,
Chuck Berry,
John Lennon,
Yoko Ono,
Jerry Lee Lewis,
and the Beach Boys,
Donovan,
Judy Felix,
Pink Floyd,
Led Zeppelin,
The Nice,
P.P. Arnold,
The Rolling Stones,
Jimi Hendrix,
Eric Burdon,
Nico,
and in the fall we will see Arthur Miller,
Stokely Carmichael,
Bert Stern,
Gloria Steinem,
Martin Luther King.
and Robert Kennedy. It's a film that looks at American society on the borders between
Real life,
media construction,
repression,
freedom,
Conformity.
Revolution.
A state of grace.
A fallen world.
So, now it's time to hear from the man who made it almost 50 years ago, a celebrated maker of documentaries who professes no great interest in real life, a man poised between and dissonantly blurring contradictions. In the words of Syd Barrett, again, that cat's something I can't explain, but perhaps he can. So, here he is, the incomparable Peter Whitehead.
It might have been both, actually. 9 years ago told this. And she wrote this extremely interesting book, Right. So really I'm going to be talking about a lot of things at once, which is what dissonance is about. Right, here's the quotation. First of all, the ancient Egyptian nearly always envisages a notion together with its inverse, which is indissociable from it. A further characteristic of pharaonic mentality is an appreciation of simultaneity, which of course is the word we would associate with Jung. This is expressed in various ritual representations, encouraged chiefly in the temples by the superimposition in a single image of several points of view and moments of time. The falcon hovering over the dead king, soon to be revived by the magic of Isis, so-called Isis maybe. The falcon hovering over the king is a typical example. Its head is in profile. One of its wings is seen from above. The other wing and tail are seen from below. What at first seems to be a frozen moment of flight, thus actually represents several moments of flight seen together. I'm going to talk about, not too much about dissonance, I'm going to talk about the uncanny. Because that description, the kind of perception of life and self and the mind and thinking that demands all the time this kind of intertextuality, is in fact, for me, as a filmmaker and as a writer and everything else, is to do with the uncanny. Well, the uncanny. This unfortunately takes me out of England altogether, into Germany, into Sigmund Freud. Am I allowed to mention Sigmund Freud yet?
It's legal.
Sort of, no, so, right, anyway, so, his book, which is called The Uncanny, 50, 60 pages, which I read once every 6 months. There was this small section, which was called The Family Romance. The Family Romance. Okay, family. Family in German is Heimlich. I don't pronounce German terribly. And it's very interesting. Well, it's what we understand by family, you know. Everyone here will, I'm sure, have a theory about family. How nice family is. How somehow we return to family. No place like home. It's where you're safe. It's where you're loved. It's where you grow up. Family. But he got worried because if you just add a little bit at the bottom of Heimlich and make it unheimlich, it's a different word altogether. But it isn't a different word altogether. I've got to tell you why now. It's very weird. He was very interested in the fact that, as far as he was concerned, everything had gone wrong in the way we had evolved. Was due to the fact there wasn't a recognition of the family, that the family is really about familiars. We all have a familiar. I have one. Mine's a wolf. I don't know what every person in this room has a familiar, might have more than one familiar. That's what primitive people believe, like ancient Egyptians. Primitive, a few more. Primitive, the technology they have, the mysticism they have. Well, he had to come to the conclusion that unfortunately this so-called paradise that we're all supposed to grow up in, recognize and live in and appreciate and be grateful for, is unfortunately, let's just say to be polite, very dangerous. Now, that's because everything that causes the kind of things he was dealing with is to do with the uncanny, unheimlich. Because he discovered that if by studying, I don't know, 300, 400 years of texts, German texts, literature, everything, he went through the whole thing to work out why nobody had been worried about the fact that they'd been using this word Heimlich all the time, and he discovered, in fact, that it wasn't anything at all to do with all those positive things. It was the source of all the problems. And that was recognized in unheimlich, which is that little bit extra. It was the uncanny. We don't have to read Ronald Manning, we don't have to go wrong, you know. Okay, 20th century psychiatry, has it solved any problems? Christianity solved any problems? Have we solved any problems, really? Honestly, truthfully? Are we not living out the lie? Freud was a total lie, because he only went through all the quotations, you know, he Googled it maybe, whatever it was he did, and he came up with all the different references throughout German literature to the use of Heimlich or unheimlich. He was blown away, as the saying goes, because he discovered that 90% of the references and the quotations by all these great Goethe and all these people and all the great poets and stuff like that, they used unheimlich and Heimlich. It's the same thing. Whoops, we're into dissonance. There was exactly, and they didn't seem to notice. In the German language, they didn't seem to notice that actually it was the same thing. And, well, he began to realize that one way or another, our model, let's call it, our model was avoiding something very important. Because it leads on, actually, to romance, which is where I come in. Because as far as I'm concerned, what is the escape? What is the escape from the fact that we are haunted? We are haunted. We suffer continuously the uncanny, the penetration, the possession, and worst of all, the theatre and movies. What better definition of the uncanny and the mix-up between Heimlich and unheimlich than the cinema? The cinema, the strangely dissonant interface between the image and the word. It is it's a trick. The reason why and how the best films, maybe all films, even documentary films, work, because they tap into the uncanny. Alfred, I could take Alfred the Weiss, Alfred, the work of such total genius, capable of possessing me for years. I had to publish the book. It is about possession, it's about dissonance, it's about the uncanny. That's like when you go into Madame Tussauds or whatever, we know what the uncanny is, you know. It's a kind of possession, it's a fear. Because what I didn't say a little bit earlier about, in fact, when you go through to the middle bit, the unheimlich, do you know what it means? Fear, terror, the eerie, the unpleasant, the nasty, the dangerous. Shall I tell you what it really means? Terrorism. That's what the family creates. Terrorism. Because I made a film called The Fall, didn't I? Which is all about my contempt for US, etc. Get it tongue twisted. So-called US surveyor. You like that one, didn't you? He's smart. He must be an American. The only guy in here who's smart and liked it. But it must be American. But I mention Bertrand Russell for many reasons. The principal one being the fact that I worked for him for a long time, but nobody knew about it. At that time I was making films. I ended up making Holy Communion. And this is how it happened. I made a film called Holy Communion with a bunch of very, very enlightened Americans. Holy Communion, beat poets. Albert Hall went to Mannheim, won the gold medal. Fantastic, wonderful. I was made into a filmmaker. Overnight. Cost me I borrowed £90, had 44 rolls of film, went into the Albert Hall and filmed all these marvellous, beautiful guys and girls celebrating their hatred for Vietnam, the war thereof, the war in Vietnam. That's what it was about. My film was about the first great happening, when in a hall bigger than this one, 7,000 people turned up to hear the Americans, who were known to be militants, let's say this, militants, who didn't kind of like being American, were happy to share their contempt. I get a phone call a few days later, so this is another time. I get a phone call after Holy Communion. They've gone off somewhere and been shown in London. And the guy says he can't, sorry, he's got to talk secretly, but it's very important that you've been talking to my ex-wife, and she's her new friend, and they'd advised him to ring me because they'd seen this wonderful film, Holy Communion, how you'd shot it, single and all this kind of stuff. I said, "Oh, that's very nice of you, thank you very much. Who are you?" He said, "Well, I can't give my name." And I thought, "Oh, American." And I thought, right. Well, I said, "Well, yes, but I mean, how can I help?" He said, "Well, you know, this is very, can I come and see you? I need to come and see you. Very urgent, and it's top secret." It's a top secret, for Christ's sake. I make a film with a bunch of American beat poets, and now the CIA is knocking at my door. I thought, "Oh, see the bastard. We'll see how it goes, yeah? I'll ring them." I had a big picture of Che Guevara on the wall, you know. I thought, there's a book I published. Anyway, I thought, yeah, he comes in and he says, "Well, thank you. I loved your film, and so did my colleague. I'll tell you straight, you mustn't talk about anything I say. You don't have to agree. I just want to talk to you about it." But he said, "I am the secretary of the Bertrand Russell Peace Foundation." I said, "Oh," he said, "You know who Bertrand Russell is?" And I said, "Of course, of course." I said, "I couldn't make the film after Smeg, could I, with these people, if I wasn't part of the movement, let's say." Precisely. The Aldermaston March, the Trafalgar Square thing. I read sometimes the articles he writes in the Times. Very enlightened man, the most enlightened man in the country. He's trying to galvanize all these people and tell them the truth. And I thought, yeah, I wonder if they believe him. He's an old man now, you know. It looks like a bit of doddering old poet. He probably was a doddering. Right. So he says, "Well, listen, I have a project for you, if you're interested. I can see the kind of films you make, and I've spoken to people, and I know where you're going." Okay. "Right, we have a problem. I am the secretary of the Bertrand Russell Peace Foundation, and my partner, Ralph Sherman, is the director. We have been involved for the last 3 years directly with Bertrand Russell, running his foundation. Every day of our lives is in contact with us all the time. We have a problem." So he said, "We have a network of filmmakers in North Vietnam. They are from North Vietnam. We have people in North Vietnam at this moment filming every day." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "This is a number of problems. The problem is that they're amateurs, some of the films are very good, and very expensive. I said, yes. I said, this is why we can be talking here, because it's something fantastic. We have a bent pilot. He said, we have a pilot who flies out from North Vietnam, I'm not quite sure how or why, flies to Europe. Now all these people who are filming, and I'm talking about filming the Americans bombing North Vietnam, the roads, the schools, the hospitals, 20 sorties a day, defoliating the entire land. And I said, well, we don't, 20 a day? He said, yes. I don't believe it. I remember thinking if Bertrand Russell said 20 a day, we'd think it might be exaggerated. He said, listen, he said, we have these films, this guy takes them to Switzerland, he brings them in here. We need someone like you to clean them up, sort them out, put titles on them, cut out the bad bits, do this and that and the other, and to make them palatable. Clean them up and make them films with the title at the beginning and thank you at the end. The truth about what is happening in Vietnam. I said, yes. And I worked for them for nearly a year on my editing machine. I was in North Vietnam 2 or 3 days a week, watching exactly what they were doing. And that's what they were doing. Flattening everything, destroying everything. Well, we know what happened. We've seen it. Later on, there was a few little bits of film would appear on CNN or whatever. It wasn't CBS. I said, you know, yes, okay, well, I suppose we should say thank you, but did they really show what was happening? I had the truth, the absolute truth. Documentary films shot by the people being murdered by so-called US Bay. Well, I should have called this talk The Radicalization of Peter Whitehead, because that was a good beginning. It never went away. And so, when years later, or not too long, you know, I made a film called Tonight with Something Loving Another, which was largely about protest. I made another film which was 100% about protest, which is a film that I made with Peter Brook and the Royal Shakespeare Company, which I called The Benefit of the Doubt, which is a history of Vietnam, a history of the war, and a history of the Americans, and the French a little bit, Dien Bien Phu and all that kind of stuff. And so I make 2 films. And I think, well, that's the one what's going to happen. So they get invited to New York, to the film festival. Holy Communion had been invited to the film festival the year before. I'd met Allen Ginsberg again. Didn't tell me anything about the Bertrand Russell Peace Foundation. I had, in the meantime, made an hour-long film with Bertrand Russell in his house in Wales, about 3 months before he died. Wonderful man. And we talked. I said, well, how can they get away with it? You know, why can't he said, well, they get away with it because no other governments in the world can stop America. Have no intention of doing so. It costs too much money. Thailand is very happy to have all those P-29s and all this and that. And the French made a mess of it anyway. It's only the rubber plantations. They want the rubber plantation, all the stuff about China and stuff. Okay, so all right, I arrived there, I make a film called, I just said the name. So I go to America, and my film is shown in the film festival. They love to like, so make love in London. Oh, it's so fun, you know. Too bad about the, you know, Bertrand Russell in Trafalgar Square reading a poem by, I don't know, Ho Chi Minh. People loved it. Marching on to Oliver Marston. Fantastic, fantastic. My film was Peter Brook, which is now considered to be a masterpiece, showing the history of the American oppression in Vietnam from another point of view, from a drama, a play, you know, whereas plays can be political. My films were shown, and kind of a success. And afterwards, there was a sort of party in the film festival, and I'm invited, of course, because the evening was my 2 films by Peter Whitehead. two young ladies come up to me and said, Mr. Peter White, I said, yes. We loved your film. I said, film or films? We loved your film, yes, we loved your film. I said, you mean tonight it's from England? Yes, he said, well, we appreciated the other one, because we're American. I said, yeah, I know you're American. And I said, well, so, I said, we appreciate the benefit of the doubt. We're free-minded here. It's a shame that it's, probably true, all that nastiness and everything. But, we tend to overlook it, don't we? Listen, have you thought about making a film in New York? I said, well, how do you mean? He said, well, we're producers, theatre producers actually, not film producers. But we saw Holy Communion and we've seen your two films now and everything. We appreciate your skills, and we raise money for plays. We saw at the time we raised money for a film, and we're wondering if, in fact, you'd like to make a film in New York. Well, I'm going to go back now, because I talked to them, because there's another thing you don't know about me. At the same time, actually, when I was in Cambridge, I was working for the American military. Yeah. Had a badge. Yeah. Big badge, it said. Second Lieutenant Peter Lorimer Whitehead, training officer of the West Yorkshire Regiment, 14th of Foot. Yeah. I was the training officer of the West Yorkshire Regiment. Didn't want to be. Called national service. I had to serve the Queen. And I thought if I was going to be 2 years, I'm going to be in the army, I'm going to become an officer. And I became an officer. I was the training officer of that regiment. So, why am I telling you that now? Well, that enabled me to have total clue. I'd done some painting when I had an exhibition in Cambridge. The next guy in there was Sid Barrett. Sid Barrett, okay. And I was in there taking my paintings down afterwards. I had an exhibition in what was it? In Cambridge. Arts Council. And I'm going in to take my painting down. And the two guys come and say, hey, are you Peter White? And I say, yes, these are your paintings. Yes. We loved your paintings. Can we have your word? I said, yes, okay. He said, oh, well, my name's this. Gosh, well, we loved your film. Your pictures. That's why it's very nice. Then we bought one, each of us. I said, you're American? He said, yeah. I loved the Jackson Pollock one. I said, what do you mean the Jackson Pollock one? They're my painting. Well, he said, no, it's clearly influenced by Jackson Pollock. I said, well, I suppose it is actually. And the other guy said, well, I like when I did the army actually. I said, well, do you like my paintings or do you like other people's paintings? Anyway, when we get to talking, they say, well, listen, very nice now. What are you doing here? I said, I'm an undergraduate, I'm learning science. And I'm working in the Medical Research Council with Francis Crick. Francis Crick? I think Francis Crick, yeah. Oh, wow, let's go and have a drink in the pub, shall we? Yeah, really? Right. Well, we loved your paintings and everything, but my gosh, well, so you're an undergraduate. Huh? What do you do in your spare time? Anyway, cut a long story short, they take me for this. We're over here, we're working for the American military. I said, oh, right. Well, by this time, I didn't have too much respect for the American military, to be honest. One thing or another. I do love that film, Suddenly. Suddenly is a great film, isn't it? You're going down a road and everything, suddenly there's nothing, and then suddenly the cop stops the guy and opens the window and he says, he leans out and says, what's the name of this time, partner? And he says, the name of this time, partner? Suddenly. He says, what's your name? Anyway, right, so I think I listen carefully, and they tell me that they're working with the military here. Hockenbury, Lake and Heath, I'm here in Cambridge, and here's all these American air bases. All the husbands are in Vietnam, places bombing. There's all these little houses with wives and families and everything. Oh, it's so lonely. Anyway, they said, well, listen, come on now, we're going to take it. Long story short, they showed me what they were doing. They were selling something called mutual fund. I said, what's a mutual fund, for God's sake? I knew nothing about money. Nothing. Oh, I said, you're going to have a difficult job convincing me. You're sending, cut long story short, the American banks just invented something called mutual funds. They actually call them investment trusts nowadays. A very clever idea. Very absolutely brilliant idea. And I had a pitch, and they had a pitch, and we had to go around and sell the military these programs. And if they stop at $50 a month, and they'd make $200,000 in 20 years. It was legitimate. Absolutely, totally and absolutely legitimate and brilliant and clever. No, it's called something else. So they bought me a car, and I went round, and I was very good at it, and I made a lot of money. I met a lot of Americans. Oh, Peter, it's great. No, did the wife like it? And I said, yeah, the wife was fine. She read it all, and it's okay, and you just sign it, and it's done. Signed by the, yeah. Well, I don't deal with the money. Let her deal. That easy. Made a lot of money. A lot of money. Why not? As I say, I was rather fascinated by money, actually, in America. So, but Harry's leaving me. Full flood. What? The family romance. Here's the family and here's the romance, yeah?
That's worse terrorism, isn't it? Committing an act of terrorism. I'll be back in a little while.
What? 2 minutes. Can I have 2 more minutes?
2 minutes.
So this is very funny. Here's the joke. We're going to end up with a real joke. So, okay, I go around and make a lot of money, okay? And I think, I do it for 6 months. And I think, this is idiotic, you know. I worked it all out. I was becoming savvy. I worked out if they were making this kind of money, and the fund was making that kind of money, and they were taking 6%, 5%, I was becoming a banker, you know. I thought, well, you know, I should be doing this for myself. If I thought, you know, I'm going to give these guys the pitch, you know. And I got into it, and I enjoyed it. And after the sports car, okay. And so I think, right, I'm going to look at some others. I looked them all up in America. There's only about 5 mutual funds. The biggest one was called the Philadelphia Fund. So I ring out the guy. Don't worry, I'm renting it. I ring out the guy and I say, listen, I'm Peter White, and I've been working for some of them, selling some mutual funds, and I've done this and that. Anyway, I had a little conversation with him. I'm getting quite persuasive by this time. He says, well, then I'd like to meet you, Peter. And I said, well, listen, have you thought about opening it up? You know, the Philadelphia Fund here in England and Europe? He said, well, I have thought about it, actually. I said, well, I'm your man, you know. I'm your man, I've got this reference. I'd love to meet you. And I said, well, he said, are you going to do it full time? I said, no, I want to be a filmmaker. I said, but I'm a student at the moment at university with money to be useful. He said, well, okay, I'd love to meet you because, you know, I like your accent, you know. I can tell why all those wives are signing those things. Yeah, anyway, so I said, fine. He said, I'll send you an aeroplane ticket. I said, fine. I said, fly to America. First class. Back limousine. Take me up to the top. Penthouse suite. Penthouse suite. Biggest bank in New York. Okay? Within 3 months, I persuaded a bank in Germany to invest £7.5 million in the Philadelphia Fund. That came a bit later, okay? So we meet the next day, and he says, oh gosh, you've come at the perfect day. Perfect day. So I can take you out tomorrow evening. We had to talk about money and this. He said, well, you do this and that and the other. I said, I was thinking of going to do some work in France and Germany. Okay, wonderful, fantastic. He said, well, tomorrow we got a special day. Best day. Like New York. I said, love it. You like the people. Love the people. He said, you sell more of these things in England than we do in Oregon. I said, okay, fine. So he said, well, we're going out to dinner. Heard of the Peppermint Lounge? So I said, yes. I've heard of the Peppermint Lounge. Yeah. Famous, isn't it? He said, yeah, you heard about it in England? I said, yeah. Total lie. I'd seen it on the television. You have to keep up with these guys, you know. So I said, hey, yes, and isn't it where they do the twist? Isn't it that thing that, you know, that really sexy stuff? Yeah, absolutely. You've heard about it? Yes. Well, we're going to the Peppermint Lounge. I said, we? Yeah, I'll pick you up, yeah, 8 o'clock. All right, fantastic. You've got to see, if you come to New York, you've got to see it, okay? Fine. Yeah, thank you very much. And pick you up, send the thing around. Car comes round, picked me up, takes me to the Peppermint Lounge, going through the door and said, "You must be Mr. Peter from England." "Yeah, he's down there." I don't remember his name. "He's down there waiting for you." "Oh, let me go down and sit down." I said, "Not happening." No, they all come out and dance. "You see, that's a dance floor." And I say, "That's very interesting." Yeah, he says, "The new kind of dance is rock and roll and all that kind of stuff. You haven't seen it. The twist, oh my God, Charlie, check it. You're gonna enjoy it." I thought, I spent 7 years as an organist in my school chapel. And now I had to put up with this, just to please a banker. No, it was worth quite a lot of money. Harry, so nearly there. And
5, 4, 9.
That's your daughter's fault. Wait till you hear this joke, you'll be running out. You won't talk to me. You won't talk to me for a month, okay? So I'm sitting there talking to this guy, I don't remember his name, about money. I'm going to become a filmmaker. He said, "Well, that's going to be very interesting." He's got he looks like this, and he stands up, just like George W. Bush, So something terrible has happened, The uncanny again, And I look around, I think, "Oh, something's going to happen." We'll be shopping, we'll be bouncing. And no. I look around, and suddenly, all that chatter you get in a restaurant, it all disappeared. Simon. What the hell's happening? I look around, and then I see her. It's one of those restaurants with a sort of gap down the middle for the waiters, and all these people on little tables, and we're on these little tables. So there's a sort of, bit like, in models and catwalk, that kind of thing, right in the middle. Thank you. Okay. But see this, it's Marilyn Monroe. It's Marilyn Monroe. I can't believe it. I think we're going crazy. This guy is well. We'll have to stick to these mutual funds. And she comes closer. And the way she walked, that's swinging walk. I come to New York to become a banker, and here it is. This guy's dating Marilyn Monroe. He's looking at it. I think, whoops, get to be closer. No, it isn't actually. It's not the real Marilyn Monroe. But with all the attributes, absolutely everything, the blouse falling off, the black stockings, I just got, and this is it. This is New York. This is my real idea about America, Here it is. He walks down. He says, he's just about to try and put her in the seat, and she ignores him, Ignores him, goes right. "You must be Peter." And I said, "Yes, how do you do?" "I'm Maria." "Oh, yeah. Well, welcome to New York. Having a good time?" I said, "Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Lovely, yes, thank you." Well, so, and this guy says, "What's the news?" I said, "Are you going to make films, are you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm planning to make films, actually." He says, "Wow, we must keep in touch, I said, "Well, yes, absolutely, very nice of you." And suddenly we had the music comes on, and 25 beatniks, semi-naked beatniks, rush out, fling themselves on this wooden floor in the middle of the restaurant, start dancing the twist. And when they danced the twist in those days, it was something else. It's never been seen on the face of the earth, Not even in guerrilla colonies. There they were. I'm thinking, I watch it a bit. She turns around at me and looks at me. I think, oops, there. Why have I come all the way to see this? Getting very awkward, actually. And I think, well, I'll have to say something. It's very interesting. No. I said, "What kind of film do you want?" And they said, "How about tonight, let's all make love in New York?" Well, they didn't get it.
No, not quite. We'll see what they did get.
Yeah, this is what they did get.
So, strap yourselves in. You're going to have a bumpy ride.
It is not because they are alienated from it, afraid to look at the films which are now seen among.
We believe we also speak for them, and because there are
The
some
camera is designed on the principle of the human eye.
the small mind and little regard. Bila na площадью голой я.
Here we have Dr. Philip Hager, Christchurch. His research interests include the study of memory, history and space, and the material and effective economies of political performance. I know his background has really been in thinking about politics and performance in Greece, that kind of where it all stemmed from the 60s and 70s. So he's been really intrigued thinking about those connections with the impact of the fall. And he's currently co-editor of Performances of Capitalism, Crises and Resistance Inside, Outside Europe, which obviously has great resonances for this week, and interesting connections with the fall. So we have a kind of connections through history with Ramsey's work and Philip's work, and over here we have Dr. Maricia Farragut, who is based at Canterbury Christchurch University, and she is going to be drawing us more towards the present, I think, in her response to the film The Fall. Her research largely focuses on precarity, gender, feminism, ethics, and radical democratic politics in British and European theatre. And she's currently working on her first monograph, Ecologies of Precarity in 21st Century Theatre, Politics, Affect and Responsibility. I think those three words seem key in terms of the film that we've just watched. So she'll look forward to hearing their responses to the film, and then we'll have a chance for some questions and answers from Peter here, and perhaps he might want to respond to some of the thoughts that Ramsey, Philip and Maricia have raised. So thank you, and I think we're going in this order, aren't we? Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Alyssa and Steve, and thank you, Peter. As you heard, I'm a dance historian, and one of my books, Judson Dance Theatre, was mostly about experimental dance and performance and visual arts in New York in the 60s and early 70s, so it covered this period. And there are one or two connections with some of what we saw in the fall. And my particular, one of my interests in the book, and that's what I wanted to raise here, is this relationship between art and activism. A lot of the dancers that I looked at were involved in demonstrations, sometimes choreographing street demonstrations or putting on concerts that were in Angry Arts Week and others. So they're opposing the war, the Vietnam War in general. The joke going round at the time was that you would go to a dance concert and see people sitting, standing, talking to one another and walking around, and then everyone would go to a party afterwards and they'd dance. So there's Rauschenberg's ballet in here, which doesn't have much dancing in. That was in the kind of ground floor of the art school building with the picture windows with the kind of coloured strips, and sometimes people were turning them around. Rauschenberg was one of the people who was involved in Judson Dance Theatre. He put on pieces there. He also did the lights for some of the concerts. The Destructionists, those performances were actually in Judson Theatre, in Judson Memorial Church, in the basement, which is actually where some of the dance performances took place. It's particularly in the second part of the film that you see the bread and puppets, the kind of very solemn, slow anti-war performance. There's also the San Francisco Mime troupe doing a kind of anti-capitalist version of a commedia dell'arte performance. You've got the poets, Robert Lovell and Allen Ginsberg. They're artists, poets, performers who are against the war. And what's the connection between their what they are trying to do through art, through aesthetic terms, and the activism? What's the connection between art and activism there? But there is also, just looking at it, there's an awful lot of music and dancing right through this film, but two bits that I would pick out in particular is the gorgeous Alberta dancing to the nicest version of America, which was, I'm old enough to be the soundtrack of my adolescence. And she's playing, dancing to this, and there's this struggle between switching the tape recorder on and off, and then the voice.
I'd like to interrupt there, actually, because I was going to talk about this, didn't get to it, because, yes, it's exactly that. There is this deliberate attempt by her to sort of, she is the image, he is the word, and the rest of the thing is around, right through the film. There is this relationship between what is image. I saw her, that's why I have her in the register. But what I have here, which I was wanting, okay, that was perfect dissonance, wasn't it? We don't hear what she says, okay, and she buggers it up all the way. But I have here, and I was going to read it, probably too late now. I actually found, totally by accident, the original. So I have the total original monologue, which I was going to read, very suggested to read, but the first thing I'd said here, because it actually is the description of the entire film. So you can't hear because it's destroyed by dissonance. You could have heard, but you didn't get to hear because I didn't read it. But I haven't. Anyway, go on. Sorry. That's me done for the day.
What I was going to say was that there is the text about the city and the city as object, which we have the original. I'm actually looking at.
Is it worth reading? It's only 5 minutes. Do you want to read it?
Read it.
I'll give you it. I'll give you it. The other one who's expressed the interest. You carry on for a bit, I've got to find it.
There's that, and the sort of struggle within the monologue of, well, what role do I play as with the camera to reveal the truth? So there is that struggle going on there, and it's about what's the identity of the city, and there you have you have dancing, which is also maybe an energy of the city. So you've got the, and then what I was going to do is connect that to the students dancing, and it's everything's going to be all right, and they're dancing, and there's again that energy. So what is the relationship between this dancing, this art, and this activism? But then lastly, I just wanted to say that, of course, really for me, I got fascinated by, when I saw it and then was doing some research, the violent scene in the church, and just checking up, I'm wondering if this is part of, perhaps also part of your history. There's Gustav Metzger, who did the first... While you were a student at the Slade?
Yes, we were both at the Slade at the same time. I have some originals of his work.
So he organised in 1966 the first Destruction in Art Symposium, and then this was the second symposium, and two of the people, Al Hansen and Ralph Ortiz, who kills the chicken, were in that first one. But also Keith Townsend, maybe you know this, Keith Townsend had attended a lecture by Gustav Metzger, and in some of his concerts he got, people expected him to start smashing up his guitar, and there seems to be a connection there. So there's the music, destruction and violence, different kinds of violence, the violence of the state or the institution, and then the violence that people, what can they do? That seemed to me kind of a way in which the dance, the music, the art, and then the activism somehow are trying to synthesize. Well,
everything you just said is there, so why don't you read it? You want to read it?
Yeah.
Because listen, I'll just read at the beginning. See?
You read it. Your
No,
voice.
no,
Just bring down the briefcase.
No.
Bring the briefcase down,
I'm not
please.
trying to muscle in. They're running away.
Bring the briefcase down, please.
What?
Bring the briefcase down. So he's separating.
I've
Yes,
got the
people.
mirror on it so I can see myself.
Oh, damn.
No, I'm only joking. But no, listen, we've just heard what we said, and this is the original line. Okay, the city of New York, the time, the fall, 1967. Now, capital of capitals and of capitalism. There is an image of New York inside all of us, sold to us by photographers, filmmakers. Looks like a bit original. A metropolis of power, etc. So you carry on that. Yeah?
So, the bit there's
Show you what I got.
but the media to remain profitable exploit the alienation by allowing no withdrawal from needing more objects,
Yeah.
and for this price they offer their spiritual and cultural ghettos as substitutes for the world, which could be, you know, what's the role of the artist? Do they just produce, offer spiritual and cultural ghettos, or? But I am a reporter, Peter says. I report the facts, I have to tell the truth, I have to be objective, which means my subjects have to be objects, and so on. So it seems a point that's a kind of one turning point, and then for me, the violence is another turning point that produces this almost trance-like sequence, but then stops, and there's the murder of Martin Luther, the assassination of Martin Luther King. But then there's another trance-like moment just before the police come in, following dancing. So there's how these things work together in the film. That's what I find fascinating.
Well, thank you. For me, my great love. My great love, always before I ever made films, we haven't talked about this, 70, was music. So, and as you probably know, I have the reputation of being the inventor of the music and all that, which is probably true actually. But I mean, that music is there not because I'm thinking theoretically the way you are. That's for sure. Just the film would have been boring without the dancing over it. But I was filming what was there, what was happening. I filmed the Disruptive Disc because somebody said, listen, they're doing this. I filmed something else. I was trying to be as passive as so you know whatever it was. It is a portrait, but it's a portrait of three things. It's a portrait of the city. It's a portrait of the people who are protesting at this moment in time. And this was the starting point of the film, was when protest must become violence, must become SDS and everything. It's also a portrait of me, the filmmaker, my role, my responsibility. And a lot of people, of course, will say, oh, you shouldn't have put yourself in it and everything. And I say, what about medium cool? That awful film of that girl in the yellow dress, you know. Every time you're getting interested, she flits across the thing. And I wanted, I failed actually. I failed to make it clear enough that I think Alberta's dance was the battle, not just between she and I, but the battle of the yin and the yang, as we were talking about earlier. And we, you know, she and I had totally different take on this. And this young lady here, Paul Clare, was just wasted 9 months of her life, but not wasted, in fact, a lot of fun. Because I discovered that I had all my diaries from that period. And I got in touch with Alberta, I've not spoken to her for 40 years, and it seemed that she'd been writing diaries all the time and never told me. But worse, when they'd gone to bed at night, she read my diaries. We suddenly had the whole story, layer by layer. Here's me talking about layer and this and that and the other. And well, I mean, you knew nothing at all about the film, nothing at all about me.
No.
Nothing. But she did it beautifully. And you find it very interesting. You read more of it than I have.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's more to come.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's more to come.
Philip?
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for the film and for being here today, and Elisa and Steve for inviting us and actually doing this event. It's quite exciting. First, I'd like to say that watching this film is a very, very, very rich experience. It's a number of different things that kind of kept hitting me together or separately. It doesn't matter, but kind of I was like, whoa, what's next? Anyway, so I'm gonna try and talk about one thing, but obviously it's never one thing. A number of things come together when you try to talk about one thing. So I'm first going to try to say what I'm not going to talk about. That I could talk about in relation to the film. Sorry?
Sounds like a Peter Weiser.
Well, you kind of influenced me somehow in this response. As Peter said, the film is a portrait of the city, among other things. And I think that the city is seen in this film through the performances of the people that live in the city, that make the city, that create, that kind of make the city alive. It's not the buildings so much as the people that inhabit those buildings. But I'm not going to talk about that.
But to interrupt, not to interrupt. But you know, my take on it right from the beginning is that the city was dying.
Yeah.
And that was it was amazing. The city was dying. I mean, take the destructivists. I mean, I consider that thing was, you know, painfully crazy and mad. But that's what everything was painfully.
Yeah.
The only way to respond to the madness of the war and everything and all that is to produce things like that, which are more and more absurd. But I saw it as a city dying.
Yeah. I can see that.
I don't know, it does come over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another thing that I'm not going to talk about is the various representations or presentations of violence, kind of to the dying of the city, perhaps, the violence that is inherent in the city. For example, the car. I was struck by these destroyed cars that were coming into the frame every now and then. Yeah.
Well, you could say you like blue cars and red cars and it looks good on film, but no, it was about the fact that I responded to it. A little old lady, do you remember, was walking by the garage?
Yeah, exactly.
Extraordinary images, summed up everything. You know, I didn't make it happen. You know, I didn't.
It was just there.
Yeah, that's a question of. That's why I was very lucky to have been a newsreel cameraman. There were quite a number of years for Italian television and Greek, because I could film anywhere, people like that, with any money. So I was able to snap up things all the time.
One more thing that I'm not going to talk about is about the representation or presentation of dance, theatre. I mean, Ramsay already did that a bit, so I'm not going to repeat that. But there are a number of really interesting performances happening on film or during that film, and they're seen in a very particular way. And anyway, I'm not going to talk about that. Finally, the last thing I'm not going to talk about, but really I am, is about the ways in which this film kind of captures the present moment or the now of the 60s and gives it to us today. So, kind of going to restart this intervention by saying that this film somehow brings together three obsessions of mine. The first, although fleetingly, is Paul Auster. I'm a huge Paul Auster, the novelist.
Yes.
He appears on the screen, he's there. I'm a huge fan
I
of
didn't
Paul
know
Auster.
he was at the time.
Yeah, he wasn't really someone
when
at
they
the
let
time.
me in there, I was very lucky to actually get into Columbia. It was certainly by accident that one of the guys in there, Newport, had seen my films in the New York Film Festival. That's why I was allowed in there, you see. So I didn't actually know anybody in there at all. And then later, of course, I realized it was Paul Auster. I knew the story of that and read one of his books. So that was very nice. But again, I didn't ring up Paul Auster and say, I'm filming, you know, can you come over and like you to be in my film?
Exactly.
And I'll pay you $500, you know. And I'll give you one of my signed novels.
So, Paul Auster is there,
Yeah.
the 60s are there, all over it. And also, there's some kind of connection with another obsession of mine, which is not there, but is somehow related to that film. The occupation of the Polytechnic in Athens. I am Greek, by the way.
Do you know about that story?
Yes, I am Greek.
Are you going to tell them?
I don't know about the story of the screening that much, and I want to ask you about it later on, perhaps. I know of it, but I don't know much detail.
I'll tell you what will interest you. There's been another one, almost identical,
Mm-hmm.
about, I don't know, a year ago, in Istanbul.
Okay.
During the occupation, during the
Gezi
revolution,
Park.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
they showed the fort exactly the same. It was the same girl who was connected with the Athens show. And another thing I thought I'd like to talk about, we didn't get right, I'm not going to talk about it, was just how the fall, you know, despite the fact it did nothing for 50 years, because I went on to Arabia to breed falcons, it did actually rumble along and do things, and sort of, and what the original one, certainly, was Athens. And that was a time when I thought, oh well, you can make a film, you can do this, you make some mistakes and everything, but it does, it contains lying, frozen lying. It can I, quick story, I like this story. Jackson Pollock, right in the beginning of the show, Jackson Pollock is in his studio, drunk, he's always drunk, yeah? Hasn't sold any of his paintings, going to kill himself, and all this kind of stuff. Right in the very beginning of his career, you know, paint on all the walls, paint everywhere, paint coming, poisoning himself and everything. Can't get a knock on the door. Here comes his friend. Jack, fantastic news. Oh, go on, honestly, you know. God, no, seriously, this is really important. No. He said, listen, sit down, get out of here. Listen, they sold one of your paintings. He said, who? He said, this new gallery you said was shits, and they've sold one of your paintings at last, and the big one. He says, wow. He said, no. Oh, really? The big one? Not blue, purple, yellow and green and whatever it is. He said, yeah, sold it. Well, that was a fortune. Has it been paid for? Yes, the money's in the bank. And he went like this and he said, well, I've got 255 bottles of whiskey for the next 18 months. It's fantastic. And the guy then said, listen, well, that's the good news. Good news, I don't know how you're going to take this. He said, it might hurt you, but you know, I want you to think about it. And he said, oh, well done, what's the bad news? He said, well, it's been bought by the Chicago Museum of Modern Art. He said, what? He says, the most important. He said, that's fantastic. Why don't you tell me that in the beginning? He said, well, I just want you to know. He said, well, come on, what's the bad news? He said, well, it's a big painting. They cut it in half to get it in. He said, no. Well, did they cut it this way? Or did they cut it that way? What do you mean they cut it? Or how? You know, he said the good news is there's another artist there who stitches things on canvas. He was able to stitch it together again. My most important was my first ever, they cut it in half. And then apparently he went to the window and looked over and he thought, he's still adding up the number of whiskey. He said, well, I suppose, you know, it started its own life.
Exactly.
It has started its own life.
How long have we got?
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Okay, so I'll wrap it up very quickly. Just one thing, and I'll pass it over to you, about the Polytechnic. I don't know how many of you here are familiar with the occupation of the Polytechnic in Athens in 1973. It was one of the major kind of resistance events in Greece during the dictatorship of the colonels, as it's been called ever since, which lasted between 1967 and 74. That I'm not sure about whether it was screened, the Fall was screened during the occupation or before the occupation, and I would like to ask you
Well, I
that.
know the whole story, obviously, and I also know, for another weird reason, that the Fall has been shown for 3 weeks running before Christmas in New York, and was shown twice in January and February, because of a particular girl who was connected with the whole thing. Anyway, so go back to a particular period. I get a phone call. I knew the woman who ran the Athens not the Polytechnic, the Athens Film Society. Okay, I'd met her in London a few times. She rang up and said, "Listen, can't tell you quite why, but my daughter's at the university. I'd love to show film. Your film, The Fall, at the university." And I said, well, that's fine, that's wonderful. It's a bit tricky because, you know, obviously the colonels and this, we don't know quite what's going to happen. Anyway, they showed it. They showed it at night, in secret. In secret. And the story is, and I was never totally sure, why I'm telling you about the New York girl, she then studied it. And has written a play. A play, Sister Sylvester.
Yeah.
And you know them.
I've read about them.
Yeah. So, so she was able to fill me in with all the story and everything, so it was all connected. And she had looked into it, because some people said, well, there were other influences, but it triggered that occupation by the students, triggered them to go out and expand it further and get other people in the university to join in. You know, this is how it works. The network to become entangled in a certain kind of scientific way. And then it went out further on the streets and everything. And one way or another, yes, then the momentum started, and eventually, and then it was quite a nice ending. And thanks to that, everybody came in. The unions came in. It's a bit like Paris in 1968. And the colonels were overthrown. They were chucked
8
down.
months later.
Right?
8 months
I
later.
don't know how many it was.
Yeah.
It took a while. But in fact, because they showed my film there, like that, they had afterwards, did you know about the Thessalonica Film Festival afterwards, which was put on by, what's that, Melina Mercouri. Yeah, she put that on afterwards. And they showed my film there, actually, because it had been shown. So there was definite acceptance by them. Everyone, various people. It was an exciting year, wasn't it? Fantastic.
Yeah.
My film was part of it, you see. And this is the other nice story about the Istanbul one is, it was in some kind of a basement like this, you know. I won't repeat that story. Okay, there was people on the streets and they were doing this and everything. And they deliberately didn't work, because the police had been very nasty, shooting people and government as well. They were going to show the fall in some kind of place like this, and they showed the fall. Suddenly, bang, the door was blasted in come the police with that, you know, what's this and this and that and the other. Everybody's screaming, people trying to get out and doing this kind of thing. You know the story, it's in one of my films, I think, somewhere. Anyway, and a lot of people hurt. They took away 10 people to lock them up in prison, made sure 10 people would go in the hospital because it had to be in the news and they could show that they were the police and they were in charge. So I said, that's a tough procedure, you won't ever show the film. He said, well, fortunately, they arrived 3 minutes before the end. So everybody had seen the whole film.
This was the first time I watched this film, by the way. And I was interested in the precarity of the image, the precarity of objects that are seen throughout the film. So there is this dying city, as you called it. It's very much communicated through these fragmented images that connote this sense of desolation. And also yourself as the narrator, how you start from as a sort of a naive flaneur, that you are observing that city, and then you become more sort of immersed in that. But there is and also this sense of uncertainty. I mean, with precarity, I also mean instability, uncertainty of what we're seeing, and you know how this sense of danger is communicated. Which brings me to the main thing that I found as a hook. I mean, I was researching on you, so
you were what?
Yes, I was researching on you and stuff around the film. So I found this very interesting quote that you said that I made this film because I hurt and I wanted people who watch it to hurt as well, or something like that.
I think that might have been if somebody was talking about the chicken. May have been.
Perhaps
I don't think the rest of the film hurts, actually.
But actually, I think it's something interesting. It kind of, for me, it says something about your sort of affective response to the Vietnam War and how you wanted to respond to that somehow, or to steer a response in a city that was dying. And the affective sort of repertoire or the affective archive of the occupation is very, very interesting.
But the occupation at the very end, of course, is totally different to everything else that's gone. And I wasn't expecting it, was I? Suddenly one day, My driver says, Peter, the thing, so I go there and I think, oh my God, this is it. I wanted to make a film about assassination. I was going to call my talk Interview with the Assassin. Because I told you this about Bertrand Russell. I had written 2 full-length scripts before I was offered the opportunity to film in New York, based on an assassination. And that was in fact because I was in New York about a very short time after JFK was shot there. And when I went there, you know, you carry on.
I mean, what I was thinking is the the body. For example, let's focus on the last bit really. That kind of relates to what I'm saying about the carnivalesque in the occupation, and in contrast to the city that is dying, perhaps, or this sort of messiness and anarchy. Here we see persistence, willfulness, sort of the revolutionary subject, perhaps, that emerges somehow. So it kind of creates a space within that space that you see that sort of energy creating something of a resistance. So what I'm trying to see is how that resistance or the revolutionary subject emerges through these images and through your sort of
there was
your
no real anything about a real revolution until Colombia. Until suddenly I was in Colombia and I thought, well, this is it. Because that was when SDS were involved and the other people were involved and organised a very serious occupation and finally got their act together. H. Rock Brown and Stokely Carmichael. Okay, there might have been all kinds of people all over the place doing their bit, as there was in England. I saw it Reagan, you know, kind of thing. But when does it reach a critical mass? In New York, it was Columbia that was the critical mass. The interesting thing, it was Mark Rudd there who set it up really originally, and then of course he knew afterwards they were after him, so he went underground. He didn't emerge, what, for 20 years? 25, 30 years. So, without knowing him, I set out to make this film about an assassination and the breakdown of legal protest. All these things happened. So I was very grateful, I suppose. So I just carried on and made what I could.
I think that the ending of this film kind of provides this both aspects of the precarious, for example, that both you see bodies subject to violence, of course, but also there is this sense of the bodies that are obdurate. So
which bodies are you talking about?
The end of the film after the occupation, so all during the occupation and after. So the third part really, the third part throughout the occupation.
Well, you see, I had a complete nervous breakdown. Just because, let's say for all the good reasons, and a real, an absolute real breakdown. But I'd written 2 scripts before I ever went to America because of the Warren Report, which I knew about and everything. And there I was in New York. I eventually gave Angela Mandraven, my driver, $75 to buy a gun. I had been totally radicalized, backed up by a complete breakdown. It's a miracle that I didn't actually use it. I'd had 2 or 3 years of permanent immersion through one thing and another. I'll give you another example. I saw Tonight, Make Love in London, when after it was shown in the film festival, some guys in a big thing decided we were going to buy it. And they said, we're going to buy it. And they thought, right, terrific. I have to go back to England. They said, well, no, we're going to open it up in Washington. And I said, well, that's okay, fine. I'll arrive on the right day. And the day I arrived there, to celebrate the opening of Tonight, Let's All Make Love in London, in what the biggest cinema in Washington, we were having a party afterwards. Martin Luther King was shot dead. The day I left, got on the aeroplane to come back because I'd given Angela $75 and I knew if I stayed, I knew I was going to kill. And there's somebody in the film. I thought, God, no, because he said, do you want to spend the rest of your life in a New York jail? And I thought, no. Came out of Heathrow, the headline, Bobby Kennedy been shot. You know. I also visited this picture somewhere now, and one of my girlfriends then, I went all the way up to the in Iran to the old man in the mountains, Alamut. So I was involved in this. That is my story. The idea of the assassination is crucial to the whole thing, because it is a revenge, but it's a revenge on a very deep level. When I went there, see how it happened, when I went there and got involved with all these things, it brings it to the surface. I had a situation where I knew I could kill somebody without batting an eye. As I say, I knew it exactly. But thank God I got out and came away. I was radicalized. That has happened to everybody.
Which goes back to what you were saying about the lack of objectivity. So you can't be an objective witness because you are so much part of that thing that you're filming, and you can't.
Well, that is, of course, you're absolutely right. You mentioned it, and you mentioned. I never thought of it like this. There's this magazine journal thing which Steve was involved in, Framework, and it was a very good. Have you seen that? A very good article by Jeremy Varron, and he describes it as being about representation. There's a lot of people who keep waiting to put yourself in it, narcissism and all this kind of, you had your girlfriend dancing and all this kind of thing. And he sort of said, well, forget all that, you know. Before, Jeremy Varron described it just about the history of this man. I learned an awful lot about him, not much about it in my film. Then there was a girl called Tina Rivers, she wrote another fascinating 10 pages about hallucinations. I just had a sort of 2-year bout of hallucinations, and it's sort of going out of my mind. And then I read this damn thing, and I think, well, she's chasing me all around. Anyway, there are two, as I said earlier, the film was about it. And was I right or wrong to put myself in it and try and... I was really trying to say it's my responsibility. What's that?
Ego has to be there. It has to be
no, the presence of the self has to be there. Self-consciousness has to be there. Now that self-consciousnness might be connected to an unconscious myth that you're living out and not succeeding with it. I would say that's what I've done all my life. I would not
it's
have
taken people don't see as much of their ego, their own ego's projection, that's creating a lot of the barriers between the connectedness. I guess that's how I look at it. So I think incorporating your self-reflection inside of it is the reminder of not looking at the self with the events that are occurring. In my opinion.
I don't know.
Sorry.
Go on. Yeah,
no, I think that particularly, I mean, I read about it before watching the film, and while watching it, I realized what it is. Watching you being at the same time a character in the film and also the editor of the film.
Absolutely.
It somehow tells me that this is not what I'm watching is not reality.
Absolutely. That's why I had to
one
put
version
myself
of
in.
it.
I had to put myself. I had to admit that, you know, to a certain degree, this is not the truth. It is not the. Everybody's got the. You know, it's this and that and the other. It has been cut off, and I've written quite a lot of this because, in fact, you know, the film is divided into 3 parts. Part 1 is the film, the camera. It's part 1 is the image.
Yes.
Part 2 is the editing, is the word. But what do we do with words? We cut things up, really. That's where we take what we've got and we chop it all out. Okay, in the beginning was the word, Christianity, 2,500 years ago. I prefer the Buddhist and the ancient Egyptian kind, who sort of try to keep things together. Okay, so I was fully aware, actually, of that it was my myth, and I was doing it selfishly for myself. Because like a lot of other people who seem to be talking the identical language.
But I think that frenzy of the image, for me, what stuck with me was that frenzy of the image. It really speaks about the now, how we perceive. So the societal spectacle, the 60s, is still...
I don't see it even now about the 60s. Because people think about the 60s as more about the music, you know, Steve talks about the mice, and I use the mice. And
but how, you know, you and Godard and others have kind of commented on that, the objectification of the image and the circulation of images.
Well, of course we knew it was the 60s.
But it's still now, and what I felt was how I perceive reality through quite even more kind of stimuli. How in the second part, you know, the film becomes so frantic and it doesn't, you know, all meaning breaks down, but also the fragments of different information or images is very much my experience now. So it's interesting how I found, you know, watching that kind of echoes how I see reality now, in a sense, how I perceive reality now.
Well, we're still doing it. We're still cutting and editing and chopping.
I was just listening to this and thinking, there was an element of luck in some things, that you happened to be somewhere where there were certain things and you had the technical skill and the equipment, and so you recorded it. But, sorry?
I said, are you trying to put me down?
No, then I was going to say that there was a sensitivity.
There was no luck involved. And the minute I got there, and you know, and I had these days, and Martin Luther King was shot dead, I knew I had a thing. And the city, and I just had to be there, and I had to do this, and I had to. It was a question of keeping the finger on what is it we keep it on. And keep persuading them that it was going to be a celebration of the city and everything that was happening, the artists and the music, and goodness knows what else. But for me, I was sinking more and more, and wondering more and more how on earth I could tell the truth and use all this material, because as far as I was concerned, that place was dying.
Was a requiem.
Was dead. And a record. And part of me, unfortunately, sorry to say this, I was saying to myself, fucking deserve it. I know that's a sharper thing to say. I wouldn't have said that about kids in Colombia. But going around everywhere else and doing this and trying to be involved with this and that and the other, I had to at some point say, well, no, I'm not going to be glamorous anymore. You know.
But what I was going to say was that there was what you actually chose, and as you're saying, maybe some of it was intuitive. This is just what you chose. There was a kind of openness and sensitivity in that.
Give me an example of something that you see then.
Well, I'm just thinking that you said, well, there's lots of music, there's lots of dancing around, but you chose to put that in, and not everyone would notice that. And there's a kind of energy in that somehow, so I'm thinking what you're saying is about the kind of precarity, about the sensitivity, the openness to seeing the vulnerability, and seeing that vulnerability as in some way social and political, and I'm thinking that you were open enough.
Okay, well, I'm afraid I've got a confession to make. Because I think we'll answer it to a degree, because there was something that influenced me enormously. I'm a bit embarrassed to mention it. Because I'd written this script, I'd gone up to Paris with Alberta and everything, and I was working on it and everything. And I saw it, and I'd written in the newspaper, and I thought I was going to see that. It was a play. Where is she? Being put on, some kind of deadbeat place down the other side of the village. And I thought, this sounds rather important, I should go and see this. It was mentioned in the review certain thing, and I went and saw it, and I thought, I came out destroyed. It was called Hair. I thought, oh, they've got it right. I was sitting there listening to the music and this guy, and what's that famous song they were singing? And this beautiful girl who was singing the front. It's human. It's just such joy. It's a musical. It is commedia dell'arte and everything, but it's still singing about all the same things, grabbing a different kind of people. Maybe the younger people would go and see it. Let me tell you the crazy story about it. I loved it so much, I rang the guy up and said, can I use some of the film? And he said, yes, of course. Yeah. I said, I'm an English guy, I'm over here, I want to use some. Actually, it was after the guy who was the lead singer, from my film. Okay. So he says, yes, well, of course, fine. I said, well, I'll come see it tomorrow night and have a chat. And he said, fine. Got to talk to everybody about it. And he said, okay. Rings me back and says, yes, well, you're an Englishman. Yes, you can use some, actually. He said, how much do you want? I said, oh, about 15 minutes, maybe. Oh, right, okay, I'll have a word with it. Rings me up the next day and says, very sorry. There's a problem. I said, well, so you can't have 15 minutes. I said, well, look, I'll set for 10. He said, no, you can't, you've got to film it all. He said, we're a union. He said, you've got to film everybody. If you film 2 people, we don't care, the rest of the people have got to be there sitting out, you've got to pay for everybody. I said, I don't need 15 minutes on the deal. And he said, well, sorry, that's all. And I said, well, I'll try and get the money, so I ring up the guys who give me the money. And they say, 25,000. Sorry. And he said, 20. I said, how much does it cost them to do the whole thing? $25,000. So I ring up the guys to put up the original money for me to make tonight. Let's all make love in New York. And I say about this, it's a wonderful, magnificent, beautiful, satanic, interesting play. I love it, and I'd like to. Can we raise the 25,000? Because they said we're always raising money for this and that and the other. They said no. So I didn't buy for $25,000. It was sold 3 years later for $3.5 million. But we kind of put down my instinct as a reason. Well, no, sorry, I apologize. No, my instinct. It was no, seriously. The point is, it was Bournemouth Castell. It was. I would be very bad. It was, in fact, and this, I made this joke about Wetzler's, whatever it was, Wetzler's medium pool. He had all this wonderful stuff with all these wonderful police smashing all these wonderful heads in Chicago and murdering people and all this kind of stuff. And then he must have thought at the end, well, God, nobody's going to want to look at all this violence. We need a story. We need some romance. You know, here's the terror and everything is, you know, the Heimlich. You know, we want a story. I'll have to go, oh, there's that beautiful actress I saw down there making hair. Well, it's like, okay, fine, so he puts in a couple. What happens through the whole play? Each time we're getting sort of trying to see a little bit more, this girl in a yellow dress. And we say, why don't you go down to another yellow dress? A coat maybe. Right the way through the whole of the film. It's absurd. I'm afraid, well, I felt it was absurd. But it made the hair in particular, threw me back. And I thought, I don't want to make Tonight It's Only Lovely Woman Again in New York. I want to actually involve. I want it to be a story. And if it's a story, why would I put a story in it? Not Hollywood, it's not a love story or whatever. And I ended up, I met Alberta, and she said, I don't want to act. I can't act, I don't want to act. I said, okay, just walk around. That's fine. I said, because I thought that was the solution. And it was, actually, because it gave me the ability to try and see it not as just another boring documentary. I was getting fed up with boring documentaries. If I'd have made Tonight It's Only Lovely in New York, it would have been awful. I know. But I didn't see anything there by instinct that would make me feel the kind of excitement I felt in England. But Hair made me totally reinvent my whole attitude. Next thing, bang, Columbia. Sold all my books.
Well, on that note, I'm afraid, Peter, on that revelation about hair, I'm going to have to wind things up. In the beginning was the word, in the end was the final cut. So there will be an opportunity, I hope, pretty soon to have your own copy of The Fall when it's brought out in glorious high definition. Special thank you to Alyssa for organising all of this, and to all our helpers, students and otherwise.